Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. Well, this is our Linux tutorial number 5, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about user management in Linux. Let me share a common example with you guys. Whenever you join an IT company or IT firm, on your first day, a user is created for you on their platforms. For instance, that company is using AWS for their infrastructure, G Suite for emails, ClickUp, Jira, etc. A user is created on all these platforms so you can start working for that company. In the same way, as a DevOps engineer, you create users for the developers and other team members so that they can use and work on the VMs or the servers. Similarly, as a DevOps engineer, you create multiple users so that DevOps engineers or other fellow developers or QA engineers can work on those systems. And this is one of the most crucial topics, how to add users on a Linux server. So as a DevOps engineer, it is one of your core responsibilities to add users on Linux VMs, to revoke their access, to remove users, to change their passwords, etc. So there should be a question in your mind, why do we have to create multiple users on a single VM? And the answer is simple and straightforward, because we know that Linux is a multi-user system. So it means that more than one user can interact with the system at the same time. So if multiple people are using one system, it is the best and recommended practice to create their respective users to maintain and ensure their security and privacy. So there are a couple of points that you should remember while creating the users. You should know that only root user can create new users, or a user with sudo privileges is able to create new users or delete the existing users. So if we create new users, it is not recommended at all to add all those users in sudo. And in user management, you must know about the user ID. The user ID of system level users range from 0 to 999, 999. So if we create a new user for us, the ID of that new user will start from 1000. I will show you that practically, but it does not mean that we cannot change the user ID of any user. We can have a customized user ID of any user. So that is the range of system level users. The new users will have their IDs from 1000. I have created a user on my VM, which is devopsmolvi. I hope that while watching my earlier lectures, you have been seeing that I'm using my devopsmolvi users to run different commands on my VM. So that user has the user ID and group ID 1000. That is the only user added on my VM. So when we add more users, the ID will change from, for instance, 1000 to 1001, 2, and so on. But we can have a customized user ID of any user. Also guys, you have to remember that whenever we add a new user, the home directory of that user is not added by default. And what is home directory? A home directory is a folder, a dedicated space in which the user can keep their data. But remember that the home directory is not created by default. For instance, if I add a new user with useradd command, the home directory will not be added. And home directory looks like /home, like my devopsmolvi. That is my home directory. Similarly, if I add a new user, the home directory will be user1 or test1, etc. But we have to use a specific switch to add the home directory. It is not added by default. We will check it practically on our VM. So guys, these are some basic concepts in user management on a Linux server. You must know about the system level users like root, www.data, http, bin, sys, system, etc. These are all system level users. We can have our own my custom user as a system level user, and the user IDs ranging from 0 to 999. The root user is the super user with user ID as 0 by default. When we add new users, the user IDs start from 1000 to onwards, and we have custom user IDs as well. So you must also know about the home directory, and when we add any user, its group is also added by default. For instance, if my user is devopsmolvi or my user is user1 or test1, when I add a new user, its group is also added with the same user ID and group ID. Now let's start our hands-on lab, and in this lab we will be creating and deleting multiple users on our Linux VM. So let's get started. Alright guys, now let's start adding our first user on our Linux VM. So as I told you that you must be a root user, or your user must have the sudo privileges to add more users. So my DevOps Molvi user has the sudo privileges, so I will use this user to add more users on this VM. So I will have to use sudo before any command while adding the users. So useradd test1. So my user has been added. But now, first of all, let's see if its home directory has been created or not. Cd home, and you can see that there is no home directory for test1 and it was not created by default. And then we will add a new user with its home directory created using the same command with a different switch. And how can I believe that my user has been created? So I can see the information in sudo nano etc passwd file. This file contains the information about the users and groups. And now you can see that the test1 user has been created with user ID 1001 and group ID 1002. So it means that 1001 group ID has been occupied by some other users. You can also see that my DevOps Molvi was created and its user ID and group ID is 1000. So as we have discussed, the system level users range from 0 to 999, and when we start adding more users, their user ID starts from 1000. So you can see that test1 has 1001 as its user ID. Now I will create a new user with home directory as well. Sudo useradd -m. -m will create a home directory as well. And test user, test, let's suppose I say test5. Alright, my user has been created. Now let's check if its home directory has been created as well. Cd home ls-l. You can see that its home directory is created as well. Now let's see what's the user ID and group ID of test5. So how can we see it? Sudo nano etc passwd, and you can see that the test5 user has been created with user ID as 1002 and group ID as 1003. So we can have custom user ID and group ID while creating user. So that's how we create users on Linux VM. Also, we can see the group information in etc group file, sudo nano etc group, and you would be able to see the group IDs and groups created here. User ID, user 1 is, now these are 3 groups of their respective users. Similarly, we have our DevOps Molvi group. You can see it. It is also added in sudo. It means that it has the sudo privileges. And you can see the group ID of root user is 0. So that's how we can check and confirm the user ID and group ID of a certain user. Also, we can have our customized home directory for any user. I don't want to have the home directory created in /home. I would rather want to have my home directory in /opt. So how can we create it? Sudo useradd -m -d. -d is the switch for home directory. Opt test9 test9. Now the test9 user will be created with home directory in opt. Now let's see and confirm it. cd/home. You can see that the home directory was not created here. So I would go to opt, and you can see the home directory is created in opt. So that's how you can have customized home directories as well. Now guys, how can we set the password of any user? For instance, I'm creating a new user and I have to hand over it to the team, to the developer, and I will definitely have to set the password. So the password command is used. Sudo passwd is the command to set passwords for the users, like user1. Oh, sorry, it is saying that, sorry, it is test1, my bad, test1. Now what should be the password? Set a strong password. All right, so my user has been created with a strong password and home directory. I will hand over this user to the respective employee or intern or developer or software engineer. So that's how guys you can have users added on your Linux VM. So if I want to see the user ID of any user, the command is sudo id test1, and it will share the user ID, group ID, and groups of that user. So similarly, sudo id test9, and we can have that information with the id command. You can see it. Sudo useradd -u. That you will have a specific custom ID like 1900 for 10. Now I will see the user ID test 10, and you can see that its UID has been 1900, which I have given, and this is how you can have customized user ID for your users. Now let's add a new user with any user command. For instance, sudo useradd -c. The command, this is a dev user and the user is dev, for instance. Now this user has been added with the default comment. This is a dev user. Now let's see what does the command shows in. Now you can see that the dev user has a default comment that this is a dev user. So that's how you can add comments while adding the user with -c switch in useradd command. Alright guys, the last command while adding a user, we can add the expiry date while creating a user. The command is sudo useradd, for instance, test11 new user -e expiry. I want to get this user expired on 31st December 2024. So 20, that would be the format 2024 and 12/31. Now how can I confirm the expiry date? The command that is used to confirm the expiry date is chage -l test11. You can see that the user test 11 will expire on 31st December 2024. So that's how you can add the expiry date to the users. So you saw that we can add simple user, we added a user with home directory, we changed the password, we also changed the user ID of a user, and we also added a user with a custom comment and expiry date. Now we will start removing these users with the userdel command. I hope that you can add users in Linux with these commands, and you must try all these options while creating a user in Linux. The userdel command is used to remove the users. For instance, sudo userdel test1. The user has been removed. We can confirm it sudo nano etc passwd, and we should not see the user's information anymore in this file. So you can see that there are no such user like test1. So now we will remove this test9 user with its home directory. Sudo userdel -r. -r is the switch that would be used, and the home directory would be removed as well. Userdel -r test9. So now we can confirm in cd opt because this user has a custom home directory and it should not be there now. So you can see it has been removed. So userdel -r command is used to remove a user with its home directory. Sudo userdel -r test5, and similarly we can remove test10 user with userdel commands. Now we can see that, so userdel -r command will just remove the user. If there is home directory, it will remove that directory as well. So we can now confirm that the users test5 and test10 have been removed. Alright guys, now let's wrap up this lecture. You saw that how we added users, multiple users using the useradd command. You also saw that we added a user with home directory with different user ID. Also, we discussed about the system level users and regular users. After that, we also added user with a custom comment and an expiry date. So I would recommend you must try all these options to add users on your VM. And after that, we removed the users with userdel command. The commands are simple and straightforward, and I hope that you will definitely try all these commands on your VM. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. I will see you in the next video.